if you're deep in the trenches, right? The bills are coming in, the job, the family. Sometimes you just need to say, you know what? I need space.
Where are we going next? What are we doing? Pros, cons. Is it good for us? Is it good for the kids? Can we make it work?
Hey guys, and welcome back to another episode of the Airbnb Nomads podcast. And on this week's Property Education Masterclass, we are joined by the incredibly inspiring Ben Lutz. Now guys, if you're in a situation right now, this second, listening to my voice where you're not happy, you're not fulfilled, you feel trapped in life's script, in life's rat race, and you're looking for inspiration. You want to make the change, you want to make the break, but maybe you don't know how, or maybe you're feeling like you have to stay where you are because of your kids, and that whole situation is bringing you down. Guys, this is the episode for you. Ben, along with his wife and two very young children, have been proving the entire world wrong by traveling the world for the last 6 years, living a fully nomadic lifestyle, different communities, building relationships, having experiences, making memories on a daily basis. Guys, it's possible, and this episode shows you exactly the blueprint of how to do it. If, guys, after this episode, you are inspired, if you feel like you've gained knowledge to make the break, to make the change, I would urge you to follow the show. Would really appreciate it. And even more importantly, please leave us a review. It helps us more than I could possibly explain. Until that point, guys, get comfortable. Listen to this entire episode. It's really going to light a fire inside of you, and I can't wait for you to hear the entire thing. Until that point, grab a cuppa, settle in. Here we go. Hey, Ben, welcome to the podcast. Thanks so much for coming on.
Thanks, Alex. Yeah, I'm happy to be here.
Mate, I'm excited about this one. We've been trying to pull this together for a little bit. You are a very, very busy man. We're going to get into that. I think right now you're coming in from where? You're in Greece today?
Yeah, yep, that's right.
You lucky little devil. I wanted to get you on because the way that you live your life along with your family, which is the unique difference here, which is why I wanted to get you on, because it's so unique and inspiring, the way that you live. But I seem to spend now, I've kind of naturally found this passion for banging the drum about trying to open people's eyes to, you know, the different way of living. And this, I actually saw a video yesterday that blew me away, and it was someone talking about the kind of time span of life and how we spend from, like, we all know it, right? But when you see it written down, from 20 to like 65 working. And it's like, if we're going to spend that much time working, then shouldn't we try and find something, whether it's the job that we love or where we're doing that job that makes us feel alive? We've got to do whatever we can to make that huge chunk of our life the best years, right? Because it's the biggest chunk of our life. And you, as far as I'm concerned, and there's going to be some people out there that maybe don't agree or don't align with the way that you've chosen to live your life and your family's life. That's fine. We're not jumping over any of that stuff. But for me personally, the way that you live and what you've carved out, what you've created, and how you're inspiring people, for me, is just absolutely incredible. So I wanted to give you a platform to tell your story in a way to hopefully inspire other people to follow suit, because I think it's incredible. So Ben, I'll on that introduction there, which was longer than planned, but I'm very passionate about it. Why don't we start with, you know, who you are, where you come from, and we'll naturally kind of digress into where you are today.
Yeah. Well, thank you. That was a very kind introduction. So yeah, my family and I have been, for the better part of the last 6 years, traveling the world with our kids. It started off as a gap year back in 2018, and it didn't work a ton during that time. We were kind of taking a mid-career reset, if you will. We had worked really hard, kind of climbed the corporate ladder, done all the things that we're supposed to do, checked all the boxes, as we were getting older. And after about 15 years in that corporate life, we said, wait a minute, this isn't working. We had a 1-year-old daughter. We kind of saw the writing on the wall and said, if we continue down this path, it's not going to be great for our mental health, and we're going to pop out, at 65, kind of wondering what happened. Like you said, So yeah, in 2018 we did a gap year, kind of took a bit of a reset, and that really opened our eyes to the fact that we can, if we could find remote work, we could keep this going and, fill that cup for us as to see the world, new cultures, new experiences, and also for our daughter. She was growing up. She was a toddler at the time of that gap year. And we thought, if there's a way to do this, we should try to do it. And so now, almost 6 years later, we are doing it. We've moved on to a new chapter of our lives where we have two kids and we travel full time. We've slowed the rate of which we travel just because the kids are getting older, and now we have to talk about education and that sort of thing. But yeah, it's a blessing to have carved out this lifestyle, and I think it is something that we will never regret having done.
Absolutely. And obviously, a big part of this episode will be committed to how you do it with kids, right? Because a lot of people, I don't have kids myself. That was just a conscious choice that I made. But I do believe that a lot of people in today's world, they feel like it's a choice, right? I can either not have kids and do what I want with life, or I can have kids and I've got to make the sacrifices and work harder and maybe not be where I want to be for the sake of education, et cetera, et cetera. So we're definitely going to get into that because you are proof that it can be done. Where I want to go back to and start with, though, Ben, is understanding what it was that made you think different and what it was that made you feel like you needed to step out of life's script, that 99% of people kind of follow, the old ways from the minute that we can talk and walk and consume information. We're getting told this perfect way that we're meant to conform to be part of society and be an upstanding member of society and buy a house and debt and get on the corporate ladder. So can you kind of rewind back? I know it's sometimes difficult, but can you go back to like a specific point in time, where it was like, this is broken?
Yeah, that's a great question. So and how do I put this? I guess when I was growing up, I had a pretty standard childhood, and I did have a couple grandparents pass away quite young. For their age, they're mid 60s, which I still feel like is still too young,
Sure.
and both from cancer and disease and that sort of thing. And it opened my eyes a bit. I was in my mid-teen years at that time, and late teens, and I thought, wow, that I thought they'd be around a little longer. So that had given me a perspective right there as like, hey, it's important to make sure we're living our lives in the way that we want to. Not long after that, I had an opportunity to go to Germany to visit family that had never immigrated over, and didn't know them super well, but I went with my aunt and uncle. And my aunt and
Was
uncle,
that the first time that you left the US to go to Germany?
no, no, I had gone on some trips actually when I was, I think, like three. I don't remember it, but we had actually gone to Germany as well to visit family.
Right.
And then I had been to Mexico and done some minor travel. Obviously, Canada is right near where I was growing up. So we had done a little bit, but that was the first time. And I went on my own, as I didn't have my parents with me. I think I just turned 20, and I went over for a week. My aunt and uncle were there, and I watched them begin a 3 month stint in Germany while I was there just for a week because I had to get back to university. And I thought, well, how are they doing this? They're here for 3 months, like what about their jobs? Because I was in that
Mhm.
middle of, college, get the job, get the degree, get the job, put your head down and work for the next 30 years kind of mindset. That's what kind of had been put on
Grind it
us,
out.
in my
Grind it out,
generation.
baby.
Yeah. And so that was kind of inspiring to me. I'd asked them all about, their different income streams and how they made it work. And there's, that's probably the first time I ever heard about passive income. And they also had rental properties and that sort of thing. So I thought, well, this is cool because they can just go as long as they've got everything buttoned up at home. Yeah, and I thought that was pretty amazing. And then that combined with this experience in Germany, with family, and just saying, oh, this is cool to see a new culture, even though it's not, vastly different than the U.S. It was just cool. So that was that combined with knowing that life is a bit shorter than we might think it is, or don't take it for granted. That was kind of maybe the beginning of my travel bug, if you want to call it that. I ended up going back to Europe quite a few times, and within the next year or two, and then that kind of the floodgates opened around the time that I met my future wife at the time, and we just traveled a ton whenever we could, but we were limited again in our corporate careers to like 2 to 3 weeks a
Right.
year. So we would just max it out, take those like earliest flights and come back like at midnight and then go to work the very next day. We were
Mm.
maxing it out. But once we had kids, it was like, all right, we have to adjust what we're doing here. But we couldn't wait to take the kids with us. So
It's so true what you just touched on about your grandparents. We for whatever reason, we all assume, right, that we're going to be here, we're going to have this perfectly healthy life and we're going to, cruise on into our, our mid 80s or whatever. And we can, it doesn't matter if we have to spend 20, 30 years doing something that maybe doesn't necessarily fulfill us because, we're going to have that time once retirement comes. But, the honest truth, and it's probably even more true in the US, right? With the diets and the stress and the work life balance and stuff like that. But the honest truth is that nowadays, a lot of us won't see those retirement days, because of the way that we're living and stress and depression and all these mental health issues. And then also, even if you do manage to get to that point, if you're fortunate enough to get there, unless you're incredibly fortunate, you're going to have certain ailments, right? Arthritis,
Hmm.
high blood pressure, maybe a little bit overweight, bad back, whatever it might be. So you're really not going to be able to enjoy life like you can while you're in your 20s, 30s, 40s, obviously. So we need to be considering that all the time. And we hear it all the time as well. The stories, the books, the movies, people who are going to speak to old people, right? Who are at the end of their life, who are reflecting, and everybody says the same thing, you know. Now I realize that I worked too much, the materialistic things that I struggled for weren't worth it. They didn't bring happiness, the only thing that really matters is experiences and communities and travel and memories and family and friends and love and, all that kind
Yeah.
of stuff. And we listen to it and we go, oh, yeah. And then we turn around, we do the complete opposite thing. So it's really, really
Yeah.
crazy.
Yeah,
So,
it's really
and
tough to get out of that
yeah,
mindset that we've kind of been brought up in. It's like, well, this is the way to do it, and I think
yeah,
we're in a generation now where we're able to somewhat flip that on
mm,
its head. Especially,
definitely.
maybe one of the silver linings out of the pandemic had been the amount of remote work that's available now, and I think that really helps people. I've seen a massive uptick in the amount of families doing what we started before COVID, before the pandemic, that now it's like the amount of families traveling full time or digital nomad families is
Yeah.
massive compared to what it once was. So I think that's a great sign. It's pushing the education into an alternative mode as well. People are really starting to wonder and think, how can we do this differently and how can it be sustainable?
100%. COVID changed everything. Obviously, it was a really sad, unfortunate situation, but I do think it massively changed the way that people are thinking. I talk a lot about that as well. I do think that a lot of people are now on the move more. They're realizing life's short. They're realizing that, there is this remote work opportunities. People are now working from home. It changed everything. And I think I think that's a good thing, obviously, the way that we both think. I think that, if people can realize that there is the opportunity to travel and take their work with them, then why not? But Ben, something that I want to touch on as well, because I think it's important for people listening at home. You had a very successful, high-paying corporate job, right, in the back home in the US, and a lot of people find themselves in that situation. It's the natural progression, the natural ladder, the steps up the ladder. And then you end up with something that I like to call the golden handcuffs, right? Where you're in a job, you're not happy, you hate your boss, maybe got a company car, you've got a 401k, over in the US, or, a big private pension here in the UK. And you think, you know what, this is shit, but I'm making really good money, so I'm just going to suck it up. So you didn't do that. You made a conscious choice, even though you was in a really good position financially, to still make the break. So talk a little bit about how that felt, what gave you the courage to do it, and what would you say to other people who are maybe in the same position?
Yeah, it's a good point. So we had started our careers in Washington D.C. and then a couple of years had moved to San Francisco, and that's kind of where the bulk of our careers at that point had been. Um, I think we were maybe a bit more fortunate than a lot of the folks that are in the San Francisco Bay Area. It's such a tech heavy industry and location geography, I should say, and a lot of those people were making real big bucks. And I think uh, I think what helped us was that we were making okay money for the Bay Area. Bay Area is very expensive.
Mm,
We've been climbing up the corporate ladder, as you mentioned. But when our daughter, when my wife was, I don't know, 6 months pregnant, is when we bought our first house. We said, let's get rid of the small apartment in the city. Let's get rid of that two-door car. We're now going to get, sensible four-door sedan. um, and move up to the suburbs and bought a real small house, like what we could afford, life savings, everything into this little house. And it was one of those moments where we thought, okay, my wife didn't hate her job. She still liked it okay, but was ready for a bit of a break. I had fallen out of, I was in finance. We both were in finance and accounting. That's how we met way back in the day. But I was falling out of love with the context of what I was doing. By that time, I was leading a team, and I really did like the team management and the development of the staff on the team. And I liked that aspect of it. But I thought, okay, I'm going to have to get promoted almost every year, not just a raise, but actual promotions
You
just to
don't have a
keep,
choice. You have to.
yeah, like, our daughter, we were paying $3,000 a month for a toddler in daycare. I mean, that with our mortgage, we thought, okay, if we have a second child, the mortgage and two daycares is $10,000 a month. And that's not even
Oh my
talking
God.
living expenses, let alone
That's
anything.
before you've paid a bill or bought any
Oh,
food.
exactly.
That's yeah.
Let alone like traveling or doing any sort of holiday. So like, we saw that writing on the wall and we thought, okay, we both have to get continuous promotions, all the time just to make things stay the same, let alone save more and get, move up in the world. So at that time we thought, okay, we don't have that job. That's, I guess maybe we had one golden handcuff. We weren't fully tied in. We thought, you know what, these jobs are paying well, but um, it was easier to leave, I think, than it maybe would have been if had we been in a really high paying tech job. Um, so yeah, we made that decision about 6 months before we actually quit. We said, all right, this is our plan. How can we back into it? We made a little calendar. We want to sell the house. We want to sell almost all of our belongings. Let's back into when we need to start these in the process. Give notice to our employer. Wait for that bonus to check to come
Yeah.
in, then give notice. We did it all that way.
Sure.
And it worked out really well. And so that basically, we funded our gap year, almost probably 70% of it from our bonuses that year, and we
So
didn't really
so
have to
so
touch savings.
so the timeline on this is, you're with your wife, you've got one young child. How old was your child at that point when you were making these decisions?
We had just come back from one of those like quick weeks away to try to decompress, and went to Hawaii with our daughter. She had just turned 1. We came back from that, and that's when we were like, let's start talking about what we're doing here with our lives. And from that was in October or November, I guess, and we came back and we were out the door on our way on our gap year the following June. So it was about
Right.
6 months, 7 months planning.
Okay. And at this point, the plan was, as you said, it was a gap year. So you was going to go away, you was going to spend a year, have some fun. But at the end of that, the idea was to come back and kind of pick up.
Yeah, exactly. We'd been out on the West Coast, and all of our families from the Midwest, from Michigan. So we thought, we're going to do this. We're not going to really work for a year. We're going to think about what we want for this next chapter of our careers. Like, what do we want to do that's
Mm.
passionate, that we're passionate about? What dreams do we want to follow? And even if they make us less money, let's move to an area of the country where it's lower cost of living. We can be closer to the grandparents for the bonding aspect. So that was our goal, and that's what we ended up doing. We went back to Michigan middle of 2019, rented a house there for a year just to kind of get our grasp on where we wanted to be and make sure we were in the right spot. And I had started doing some photography stuff during that gap year in social media, and I came back and started working as like a real estate photographer and videographer. Um, but I mean, we were only back a couple months before we planned another 2 months getaway in that fall. We thought like, let's, we got the taste of that gap year, and we thought we need to keep this flexibility going as long as we can. My wife had started working back in finance as a remotely before COVID. It was great, and I was doing this real estate photography gig. And my wife was pregnant at that time with our second child, and he was born 2 weeks after the COVID lockdowns. So we
I
were a
think
bit
it's I
locked
think
in.
it's I think that is a great thing to do, Ben. We're not saying that everybody needs to, follow in your footsteps completely and go completely, for years and years and years, but purely to take, because sometimes, the old expression, you can't see the, what is it, the woods for the trees. If you're deep, if you're deep in the trenches, right? The bills are coming in, the job, the family, day to day, week to week, month to month. Sometimes you just need to say, you know what? I need space. I need some space to just go and sit and be in a different environment and think and just have the space to really reevaluate things and think,
Mhm.
okay, what's important here? What do I truly want? What's my options? Because sometimes when you're deep in the trenches, it's just like you just like, just getting punched in the face every single
Yeah.
day. And it's just about, it becomes about survival rather than actually living. Right. So I would recommend to
Yep.
anyone, if you can, or if you can find a way, or if you can just pull together the courage to say, you know what, I need this and I'm going to make it work regardless. Don't go in blind, have a bit of a plan, but just
Yeah.
take that 6 months, take that 12 months, go somewhere idyllic, go somewhere that's on your bucket list and just sit and be and think and reevaluate. I think that's a great way to start.
Yeah, exactly. That was our plan. We thought we can always fall back into the what our degrees and our what our corporate careers were. That's not that uncommon that you have a gap year saying, "Hey, we just needed a reset, but I'm back. I'm ready to go again." It could have just been
Yeah.
a break, and we could have gone back into the corporate life. But for us, that allowed my wife to start working remotely in finance, which before COVID was, she got a little bit of a gold mine role where she could work with this company remotely. And then I started doing the creative stuff, which is what I think I had fallen out of love with my old finance career because I wanted to be more creative. So I started doing
Right.
photography and videography. I started, managing our social media channels and our blog and all that. And then, COVID hit. My son was born 2 weeks later, and it was winter in Michigan, and we kind of just it was a bad chunk of time there for everybody, right? And so as soon as things opened up enough for us in 2021, well, I should backtrack. We had rented there in Michigan for that first year. In June 2020, we bought a condo, 2 bed, 2 bath, right in the heart of Traverse City, right in a great spot. And we knew it was zoned for short-term rentals, so we had this longer-term plan that we could live there, and then in the summers we would go and travel for like 3 months and rent it out during the peak season. So sure enough, 2021 came, things started opening up a bit with travel, and we thought, well, let's try it out. So we put our place on the on Airbnb, and we left end of May and came back. I guess it was 1st of November, and during that like 5 month stretch, we ended up making like 2 years worth of mortgage. Like, it was amazing how much. I mean, there was such demand after COVID that people were willing to go away just for a weekend, just to get out of their
Mm,
town or their house, right?
right.
So it was a great intro to short term rentals for us.
That
And we thought, okay, this is great. We got to figure out a way to do this more and allow us to travel more.
If you love to travel like me and you understand the power in escaping the money for time exchange trap, but you just don't know how to do it, then building an Airbnb consultancy business could be exactly what you have been looking for. Right now in the UK, there is a completely untapped opportunity through helping struggling Airbnb hosts by turning around their underperforming properties and generating you huge commission payments in the process. We are going to teach you all of the tools and all of the techniques that we've learned over the last 5 years through building our very own multiple six-figure Airbnb business, arming you with everything that you need to swoop in and save the day. Minimal startup costs, zero risk, and almost unlimited potential. Sound good? Welcome to the Airbnb Consultant. Contact us through any of the channels included in the studio notes to get the conversation started. And I want to talk about that, Ben, because, I knew that you had some Airbnbs, and obviously that, that's why you're the perfect guest. The travel, the Airbnbs, which is, how you kind of helping to supplement your lifestyle as well now, which is amazing. So I want to talk a little bit around that. But one thing that I wanted to ask, and if we could backtrack just a little bit, because I think it's quite important, when it came to you making this big decision to leave your, very comfortable, very well-paid job, you're on the trajectory to, big things within the company. When you started to tell people, or when you started to have conversations at work to say, look, this isn't really filling my cup and I need more, and we're going to go and do this. Was there, what was the kind of, was there any pushback from that? Was there any people that were kind of, deep in, heavily committed to the grind and, pushing forward, that were like, Ben, dude, like, what the hell are you doing? Like, you're on the path there. You're crazy. Did you have any kind of conversations around that?
Yeah, I mean, I think that was probably the norm reaction that we had was what are you talking about? Being that we were in finance, right? We're all money money minded, right? We
Mm.
we think about it all the time. We think about our 401ks. We think about retirement. How are we going to fund our lifestyle? What can we do with our passive income situations? So we had some friends that were just like, super excited, and their first reaction was like, "Well, when are we going to see you again?" And then we had some friends that were like, "Hey, that's amazing, but like you're in your prime earning years. Like, what are you going to be? Are you going to be working that year?" And we're like, "Not really." And like, well, what about stashing more away to your 401k? And what about this? And like, it was that the first reaction was more financial related. Like, A, how are you going to make it work? Are you actually going to be just draining your savings to do this? And B, how are you also not going to be contributing at the time of your life where you should be contributing the most? And our answer was basically like, hey, we worked our butts off for 15 years, and we maxed out our 401k every single year. We've got a good chunk of change. We had just sold our house to do this as well, so we were sitting on a little bit of money, and we thought it's worth it for us to do this. Like, this is an investment in our future, basically, to take some of our money, make sure that we're not rabbit hole down 30 more years into this. It's worth it for us to do this now. So yeah, we definitely got not pushback, but just a bit of shock and like, how could you do that? And that's fine. I mean, everybody's different, and there are plenty of people that maybe don't think of the grind as a grind because maybe they're super
Yeah,
passionate about it.
sure.
But yeah, that was a pretty common reaction that we would get.
Yeah, and look, going back to what I said earlier, well, I'm not here to preach and tell everybody they need to do this. A lot of people, I was having a conversation with a friend over the weekend. I was at a family party at his place, and he's like, I'm like, "Si, how's work?" And he's like, "Man, we're just crushing it, and I'm getting promoted, and we're buying companies, and and he absolutely loves it, and that's amazing, So I'm not saying that you have to do this, but I'm talking more from the angle of people who think it's the only way, and they're not happy and they're not fulfilled, and they're
Hmm.
like, oh, it's just like this monotonous, like kind of sludge through life. And what does life become? And, what's the point? And da 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 da. For those people, there are other options. But, it's interesting what your friend said to you, who's like, Ben, these are the prime years of your life where you need to be working and saving. And it's like, it's crazy when you really break it down and think about it. Like, how can that possibly make sense? But it's it's the stuff that we're spoon fed right through life. What are you saving for? If you're going to spend your best years working and saving, putting away for when? For what? Because you may not get there, and when you do, like I said, the chances are you're not going to really be able to fully enjoy all the benefits of that work. So it's like,
Yeah.
how can that possibly make sense? But it is the way that the majority of us think, because of
Hmm.
what we've been told and the way that we've been brought up. So, I
Yeah.
mean, what
Eh,
do you think? It's kind of backwards, right?
I mean, for me, it feels a bit backwards. Like we talked about in the beginning of the
Mm,
the podcast, is that these are our most healthy, generally healthy years, and that's many people have families. It's a time to bond with them, really experience the world. And if
mm,
you're stuck behind a desk or a computer, tucked away, working 40 to 60 to 80 hours a week or something, uh, it, you know, it it doesn't feel right to me. But at the same time, I know I have a different mindset than most. I
yeah.
mean, I can definitely understand the will to grind away to build generational wealth where it goes
Mm,
beyond you, and you don't even,
mm,
maybe people say, hey, I've got a good chance right now to make a bunch of money that will set not only my family up, but my kids, my grandkids. And that's a whole different. I mean, if you got that ability and that possibility, I'd say,
mm,
don't pass on that, because it's not like you easily come into that sort of situation. But I think for the mindset of like, I'm going to work all this, and then when I get to 65, then I'm going to go to New Zealand, and then I'm going to bungee jump. I don't think so. I mean,
yeah,
maybe, and if you can, then that's amazing. But
yeah.
I think health wise, for me, literally when I turned 40, things really did. Everybody
Oh
says,
man.
oh, wait till you get to 40. I'm like, well, I don't believe that. And then sure enough, I was like, wow, okay, there's a real
Yep.
thing with our bodies changing and all that good stuff. So it's yeah, enjoy it while you can is what I say.
100%. Okay, so let's get into the Airbnb stuff, because that's obviously quite interesting to a lot of our listeners who are obviously interested in Airbnb or property in some way. So what was it that made you, did you already have that plan? Like, maybe we can get a few Airbnbs, that's going to help us go off and, create this passive income. Did you learn anything? Did you go and study? Did you take any courses, or you just jumped in?
We just jumped in. Obviously during that gap year, we went to what, 22 countries, I think, in 11 and a half months, almost entirely in Airbnb. So we got a lot of experience on the guest side. We got to see how some hosts were fantastic, some hosts were not very great.
Yeah.
And we knew that, hey, if we go back to Michigan and end up buying a place that's in the proper zoning in this town that we're in, it's really a high peak summer spot. And like if we time it right, it can be our primary residence, and then we can go off in the summers and travel. So we'll get the tax benefits of primary residence, we'll get the money coming in from Airbnb, and we'll get to travel. So we had this little idea in the back of our minds, and we were able to work it out. And so we bought that first one in June 2020, made a good chunk of money in 2021. We came back from that trip and we were pretty much like, all right, we need to get out of this house entirely and rent it full time on short term. And so around that time, we had already also been thinking about moving out of Michigan and moving somewhere else back to California. So early 2022, right before we moved to California, we bought a second condo there in that same town. We said, let's see if we can replicate this. So now we have two short-term rentals there in Traverse City, and we moved to Tahoe for a year, South Lake Tahoe, California, and rented a house there for a year, thinking that, all right, we're going to settle down. Our daughter's about to start kindergarten. Now we're going to get back into, at least from a schooling and education standpoint, go back to that traditional path, even though we were still working remotely, working online. So we were still nomadic in the fact that we could go anywhere. But we thought, well, maybe we should end the nomadic stuff and put her into traditional school. And we can get to that if you want in a moment. But yeah, so to the Airbnbs, we do have two at this point, and they've been one pays for itself. We need to think about if we can maximize that a little bit more, and the other one does quite well. Actually, gives quite a nice return.
And I would imagine Michigan. Am I right in thinking that you kind of got both seasons because you've got this? Have you got skiing in the winter and obviously some you got the lakes? It's
Yeah, I wish it was a bit more two seasoned. We do get some snow up where we are. Not a lot of elevation for skiing, so like
right.
people that live in Michigan definitely go up to that area to go skiing, but it's not drawing people from around the country. Especially we had lived in South Lake Tahoe, so we had some massive mountains out there that we. So yes, there is skiing, but it's not enough to call it a two season rental, I would say.
Got you. Yeah, I mean, I absolutely love the US. A lot of people who know me know that I used to live there. In mostly in South Florida, but I've got a huge love for Colorado, and then also out west. It's just the most amazing place, and I think a lot of people in the US they don't own passports, right? They never leave the country, and obviously. For a lot of those people, it's because they're just not that way inclined, the way they was brought up or whatever. But for the other people, it's a conscious choice who just decide, that there's so much to see in the US, mountains and lakes and oceans and different climates. And, it's so vast. You can literally spend years just seeing within the US, all the national parks and everything. It's,
Hmm.
it's absolutely amazing. So, I think that's another testament to you. I wouldn't say that, without stereotyping that, people from the US are, the most traveled, kind of, people in
It's,
the
I
world.
mean,
So,
yeah,
to
I
meet
don't
your
disagree
family.
with that though.
Mm,
It's we like to lead to, I wouldn't say that we like to put the U.S. down in any way, especially not the natural beauty and some of the
yeah,
opportunities that can exist in the U.S. I think some of the reasons that we don't always love it are some of the safety reasons and some of the social reasons and some of the there's a lot. Every place has its own thing,
of
though, right?
course.
There's no perfect place. But yeah, especially out west, wow, it's one of the most beautiful spots we've experienced.
It really is. Okay, so let's get to the point where you're going to make the break for the long term now. So, you know, at this point, you've got two kids. You've got
Yeah, yep,
the couple of properties. The Airbnbs are working out. Your wife's work doing the remote finance thing. So you spoke about, maybe we need to settle down and, we need to conform to a certain extent because of the kids' education. So what was it that kind of changed that? Because I know now obviously you found your way, and we'll talk about that. You're educating your kids just fine.
yeah,
So what kind of changed your mindset on that and gave you the confidence to continue?
yeah. Good question. So we had started our daughter in kindergarten in South Lake Tahoe, and there was I think the natural excitement, just, you've seen parents go through this, where they're off to school and the whole thing, and we went through that. Our daughter was super excited. It was a fine school. It was nothing to write home about. It was, I'd say an average school. And after about, a few months, we started seeing the amount of, she was already getting like multiple like hours of homework to do, and mainly, I mean, she was just learning to read, and it was like, great, we get it, but we weren't in love with the amount. Like, she'd be there all day, and then she'd come home and have another hour or hour and a half, and I'm like, we don't even get much time with her as it is now that she's off to school. It's just didn't that was one aspect that didn't seem great to us. And then,
Is that
to be
normal for
honest,
kids of that age to come home with homework?
I
That
I,
seems a little
I
intense.
I felt like it was abnormal, but the more I talk to families that are in the traditional system in the U.S., I don't find it to be that abnormal. Unfortunately, I feel like it's just a different style of education, but I think not much has changed on that mentality, at least in the United States, in like 100 years. So,
Wow.
there's different ways, I think, to educate, not necessarily right or wrong, but every kid learns differently, and if you just
Sure.
conform them into this one box, it doesn't work for everybody. But that being said, we also had a bit of mental health angst, and every time we would drop her off at school, obviously, like, school shootings in the U.S. are not unheard of, right? It's unfortunately a
Mm.
very common thing, and we would drop her off just going like, you just have this like deep, like, it just makes you wonder, because it's like you never think it would happen, and
It's so random there, isn't it? And it's so
it
it's
is,
so got. I was going to say scattergun, but probably not the best the best terminology. But
yeah,
everywhere across the US, it's not
yeah,
located in one specific area.
yeah,
So I completely get that.
yeah. So, that being said, I don't want to go down that whole rabbit hole, but we felt our mental health was struggling, and one reason we had went back to South Lake Tahoe area was because that was always our happy place when we'd go away from the Bay Area. We'd get out there in nature, we'd go hiking, we'd go boating, we'd go to the beach, we'd go skiing, we'd go camping,
Mm.
fresh air in the mountains. It was our happy mental health spot. So we thought at the time, we're like, let's move to South Lake Tahoe. If we're gonna be in one spot all year round, let's go there, because like we know we can get outdoors, we can enjoy it, but we'd still have this thing with our mental health when we drop off from school, like, oh, I don't know. But anyways, so that we were struggling with that a bit as parents. She seemed to like the school okay, was doing all right, but about 6 months into that, we had an opportunity to go abroad for 3 months with a program called Boundless Life, where they basically are setting up digital nomad hubs specifically for families with kids that are under 14. And we, at that time, I had ramped up our social channels over all these years. We had a bit of a following. They wanted us to come and experience 3 months in Tuscany and help kind of spread the word. And so we thought, all right,
So they
it's,
reached out to they reached out to you and said, "Guys,
yeah,
would you like to come?" And wow,
yeah,
and
they were
that
in
was off the back of you growing your online brand and getting
yeah,
noticed and getting a
yeah.
following. Amazing.
Yeah, exactly. And so they were, I think, maybe only a year old company. So they're still a very young company. And we said, well, let's check this out, because I mean, she's in kindergarten. It's not like she's doing
Mm.
rocket science yet, and it's the back 3 months of her kindergarten year. It's not like we're taking her off the first 3 months where it's important. You're getting to know the teachers and the kids. It's the last 3 months, and let's face it, the last month of school, everyone's basically checked out, right? Like,
Yeah,
so we
yeah.
thought, all right, let's do this. So that was April 2023. We unenrolled her from the school, and went off to Tuscany. And so learning, that over those 3 months, we learned a lot more about this company and their education style, and it was a perfect fit, because up to about 6, 7 years old, it's kind of heavy Montessori style. And then after that, they move into more of a Finnish-based education system. So from Finland, where it's lots of outdoor time, lots of, I wouldn't call it child-led learning, but it's really child-focused and intently on each child and how they can best learn, and lots of projects. And they do education. They do a quest every cohort, where they focus on one of the United Nations sustainable development goals, and say, like, here's what clean water means to people, and like, here's why it's so important. And the kids learn all these things that they would never learn in a traditional classroom. So long story short, we loved the education. It was great for the kids. And 2 weeks into that time in Tuscany, we thought, how can we keep this going? And luckily, we had all of our stuff had already been packed up and put into storage unit in Tahoe. And we thought, well, we were planning on coming back to Tahoe after those 3 months, but then we said everything's packed up. Let's keep it going.
Things are
So we've
working.
now, yeah, we've now joined them on our fourth location, fourth country, fourth cohort. Um, and our stuff is still in that storage unit and has not been opened in more than a year. So um, we do have some decisions to make here coming up in the next couple months on what we're doing. But I'm so happy to have found this route. They usually have 20 or 25 families at every location, so you've got a community instantly. You've got a great education. My daughter just yesterday was learning to sail. She's got sailing lessons here in Greece. She's learning how to sail in the Aegean Sea by the guy that's instructing her is a former national Greek sailing member, and
Wow.
so the opportunities are there for kids to still have the extracurriculars, still have some sports in a community, no matter how you decide to make world school. But there are more structured opportunities like what we're going through, and so far we love it.
And what you said a little bit ago, Ben, about the education system, right? This is something else, kind of bit of a pet peeve of mine. I probably don't have the right to kind of have an opinion because I don't have kids in the education system, but I do have a niece who I care about a lot, my sister's daughter, and I believe that it's so, I don't know about the US, but in the UK, I think it's so archaic. Everybody is judged on, you know, these end of year exams. And, if you're not a good exam taker, or if you're not an intellectual person, or if you're, a lot more creative, and that's the way you're not going to excel. So those people get left behind, and that affects them for the rest of their lives. And I do think that it's changing. And I do think that, you know, there are people who are now leaving maybe without the qualifications on paper, but they've got incredible creative skills that's going to see them do really well in the opportunities of today's world, which is online, branding, marketing, all that kind of side of it, they're going to do really, really well in. And that is the door that opens up the world, right? Because that is the stuff that you can make, you can turn into a remote life. But some of the things that people are learning, that these kids are learning, it's just not relevant to today. I know that obviously you need English, you need maths, you need a bit of an understanding of science. I'm not being ignorant and saying, well, we've all got a phone in our pocket with a calculator on it, so why do we need
Mm-hmm.
to learn maths? But it needs to be tweaked and adjusted and changed to today's world. The world has
Yeah,
moved on massively since these curriculums and syllabuses were built. So I
yeah. No,
completely buy into what you're doing and the way that you're bringing up your kids.
yeah, I couldn't agree more. I think there needs to be exactly like you said. It needs to be tweaked to a modern world because, I mean, for example, I remember when I was in university, I was studying accounting, and we had a class where we literally had to. They taught us how to query like the accounting standards databases. Like, here's how you should like type a query. Basically, here's how to Google. Because they realize that all of these standards, you're not going to be looking them up in books. You're not going to be. They're all going to be online, and you're going to need to know what to type in to find what you like. And this is what happened. What 2003, 2002. So at least they were starting to see like, hey, this is changing. We need to teach these kids what they really need to know is like, how do I query this instead of how do I look it up in a manual book, right? So I think that needs to filter all the way down through the education, all the way down to preschool, all the way up. It's just how can we teach the kids what's going to be most useful in their lives while also supplementing the mastery courses, right? Like math, and like of course you need to know the basics at least.
Of course, yeah.
Um, and I don't want to be ignorant to like what you're saying as
Yeah,
well. Like, but
history, and yeah, you need that.
of
You
course, of
should know
course.
that. Yeah.
Um,
But
but
I
man,
tell you something I saw online. It was actually yesterday, and if you want to talk about something that proves the point, I thought it was absolutely fantastic. It was a video that someone put up from somewhere, obviously a kid of some kind, and he said, I wanted to put up this video of a slice of bread falling over to prove to my marketing teacher that I can grow more followers than him through his marketing class by putting this slice of bread on this video. And it's a slice of bread and it just falls over, and it's got like 1.5 million views or something. just to prove to his instructor, at the school that things are changing. Like, you can do this
Yeah,
stuff if you're clever with branding and marketing. I thought it was absolutely genius. Um,
yeah.
so yeah, so where are we now, Ben? What's the plan? You're bringing up your kids in this incredible environment, and just touching on that subject again. I I know, yeah, I've been away 22 years, right? I'm now back in the UK for a little bit, but I'm not going to be here for long. I love life. I love going new places, seeing things, sunshine, oceans, travel, community, having all these different places to go and see. And along that road, along my life of living in all these places, and a lot of them in quite remote, not so much now, but before, very remote islands, as a scuba instructor, small little atolls in different places. And I met kids and know of kids who they've been brought up in these very different places in very unique circumstances, and a lot of the time circumstances that people might not agree with. Maybe they're being homeschooled, maybe they're growing up in areas or parts of the world where it's just it's not typical, it's different, different cultures, different people, different
Mhm.
environments. But those kids have the most incredible social skills. They might not be deeply, heavily intellectual, like maybe you would be if you was here, but their skills, their social skills, talking to people, holding conversations, being
Mhm.
comfortable in group environments, dealing with strangers, engaging, seeing opportunities, and being a lot more creative. It's off the charts. And I think
Yeah,
that is what a lot of people miss when they're thinking or considering or judging how other people are bringing up their kids. That's different to the typical, well, get up, get on the bus, go to school way of life.
yeah,
The other skills that you pick up is just unreal. And I'm sure your
yeah,
kids you're seeing the same with your kids, no doubt.
yeah. I mean, I couldn't have said it better. I think the adaptability that
Mm,
our kids have gained in their, my daughter's 7 and my son is 4. Um, the adaptability they've gained is absolutely priceless. I mean, I can remember, when I was younger having a routine, and if something happened and it wasn't in my routine, you immediately your heart rate goes up. You're like, oh, and like you know what I mean. This is not what I expected, and like
mm,
sometimes it takes people well into adulthood to get over that and to understand, And when imagine if you're in your career in business, like that's not a great trait to have when you're uptight if things don't go your way. Like that's something that you need to squash real early on. And I think our kids, if something is new and different that they haven't seen, it does not. They don't shy away. They don't get scared from it. They're if anything curious and they want to go check it out. If they
amazing.
see. So I think that the adaptability is fantastic. And a lot of people do come to us, especially on social media, with their own thoughts and opinions on how everything should be done and how the kids should be raised. And we get a lot of, well, they need routine, they need this, they need that, they need consistent friends, and everybody's to each their own. But I think there's a huge benefit in having the kids, as long as they're happy with what you're doing, and they're excited about it, and you're not forcing them or dragging them along on your journey. Um, it's amazing what they can, the social skills and the other skill sets that are often
Mm.
just up to you to figure out in life, later in life, often in college or university, like where now you're starting to have to be social and like, how do I deal with the situation? I think it's a huge benefit. So
Yeah, and I think what we all need to be more aware of is, for example, when people come to you through your social channels and say, kids need the same friends and they need routine, and where are they getting that information from? These people, they're not psychologists, they're not heavily educated in those, the things that they're saying. It's
mhm.
information and decisions that they're making based on what they're being told or what they're reading or seeing on mainstream media and different TV channels and all the rest of it. So
Or their
sometimes
own
you have to,
fears.
or their right, or their own fears, and
Yeah.
you know, call it wisdom. Getting it. I'm in my 40s now. I'm reflecting, starting to realize things, but it's like through life, you basically make huge decisions which changes the complete trajectory of your life based on what someone else is telling you who hasn't achieved their own dreams, or things haven't gone to plan for them, or their kids haven't maybe turned out to be the happiest that they could be, but they're still sitting there in front of you telling you to live your life a certain way
Yeah.
that they believe in, that they see fit. And it takes me right back. I talk about this a lot. When I left school with nothing. I was a complete screw up, hated, rebelled, authority, all the rest of it, very typical story. And I'm sure a psychologist or therapist could pull all those reasons out of me as to why I was like that. But, I remember it like it was yesterday. I sat in front of a careers advisor and they said, Alex, what do you want to do with your life? And I said, no idea. And, she said, do you like cars? And I said, I'm a 16-year-old boy. I'm like, yeah, I love cars. So she recommended that I go and become like a mechanic. So I spent 4.5, nearly 5 years of my life from 16 to 21 doing that. And I realized about 3 days in that it wasn't what I wanted to do, but I stuck it out because I didn't have anyone guiding me, and then I left and the rest is history. But my point is, I was being advised by someone who you can be damn sure never ever planned when they was 16 to be a careers advisor, right? Not saying there's anything wrong with that, but I'm pretty sure that
Yeah.
wasn't pinned on their wall, right? So we need to consider that when we're making judgments. And it's just the way that it works, and it's kind of crazy. Ben,
Yeah.
something else I want to talk about. I'm looking at the clock here. It's on triple speed because there's so much amazing stuff here. I'd love to do chat for 2 hours. I want to talk quickly about the fact that you've built this life. You're now like, okay, this is working for us currently. You're saying you might have to change some things up, but right now it's working. You've had years of this incredible experience all over the world. Your kids are amazing. You're crushing it, right? But you have, off the back of that, and because you're smart and you've seen the opportunity and you've been motivated and disciplined, I'm sure I know about social media. I'm in it every day. I know it takes a lot of work, but you realize that if I document this journey, right, that in itself can start to fund this life. And this is something else that people need to realize. There are always these opportunities. Once you step off of out the rat race, or off the beaten path, and you do something different, people are inspired, and people naturally are interested and intrigued. They want to know about you. So if you start documenting that, that's a huge opportunity. So tell us how you've managed to do that.
Yeah, yeah, it's a great point. So when we first started on that gap year way back in 2018, we created a social media channel, the Fun Employed Family, because at the time we were going to go be essentially for a year unemployed, but we were also having fun. So we came up with that name, the Fun Employed Family, and we basically just started it to document our own journey, but also basically to share it with our family and friends. We were moving around so much, and we thought this is one spot where we can post here. If people are interested, they can come check out what we're doing, what we're up to. So we didn't have to, shoot texts and things off to everybody all the time
Mm,
with our updates. So we started off that. But the fact that we were quitting our jobs and selling everything with, we had pretty much what most people would want on paper.
mm,
And we were saying this isn't for us. Like this version of the American dream is not our version of the American dream. We're flipping it on its head. We're saying we're done with that. I think that mentality, like you said, it was interesting to people. So when we left San Francisco, we started getting a little bit of press, even just local news stuff, where people are telling our story a bit. And then our following started
was it
growing
mostly
throughout that.
supportive, Ben? Was it a supportive story for the most part?
For the most part, yes. I think a lot of people were like shock, cool, wish I could do that.
Mm,
But then of course there were the people saying, "Oh, you must be rich, you must have trust fund," and I mean the amount of crazy comments that come out of people on the internet when they're hiding behind their phones is just wild. And we've luckily
oh
learned to
yeah.
laugh at it at this point in time. We just brush it off and say, you know, different strokes for different folks. But yeah, so we got a little bit of press, and we started gaining followers throughout that year-long journey because people wanted to see what it was like to take a toddler around the world to Cambodia and to remote islands in the Philippines and Indonesia and throughout Europe a bit. And so we gained followers that way, and we started at the end getting reached out to by hotels and stuff saying, hey, if you ever come to our place, we'll give you a few nights in exchange for social media. So that's kind of how it started, and my creative passions were flowing right into that. And I was like, let's build this up. And then when I got back, that's kind of how I started into real estate photography and all that. But in the meantime, we've kept that channel alive the whole entire time, documenting what we're up to, where we're going next. The following has grown. And I think a lot of people look at us as family travel and maybe gap year or full-time travel, if you want to call it, experts. And I never would have ever imagined that, but people come to us all the time with comments and DMs asking for advice or what would you do here, and and also thankfully amongst all the haters, there's the people that say you've inspired us to do this, or we're quitting our careers and we've got remote jobs, or we've come up with passive income, we're going to make it work. We're doing so we get all this positive feedback. So I guess we're inspiring some people out there, and if I can make other people just think a little bit outside the box and let them know that it is possible, and you do not have to be rich. A lot of where we go, we spend a lot less money than we ever would have spent in the U.S. just on an annual basis, and it's cheaper than you think it is to do this, especially if you go slow travel, kind of long term, a month to 3 months per destination. Local living is much less expensive. So
Yeah, and great point. A lot of people might look at you and think, man, like you said, must have a ton of money, traveling the world with his family. But what people have got to understand is there's parts of the world, that you can go and live for basically next to nothing, right? I used to live in Thailand, and every day for lunchtime, there'd be this bent over, toothless old man, that would be pushing this ricksy old, cart, through the streets and selling the most incredible, the freshest fruit you've ever tasted, some sticky rice, some chicken. And it, costs like, I don't know, 20 cents, and you
yeah,
just completely fill yourself up. But when you've got the weather, right, you don't need all of the materialistic things that you need in the UK or like you do in the US. You don't need the big TV. You don't need the sofa with all the stupid throw pillows and the feature walls, because you're never inside. You're
yeah,
constantly out. That's why I love being in Mallorca. I'm either on my bike or I'm walking. I'll get a coffee, a book. You sit on the bench, you people watch, you look out to the ocean. It costs nothing. So the
yeah,
cost of living, goes off a cliff. You don't need it. So you
yep,
can have this idyllic life, you can have these experiences, see these places, and also do it a lot more cheaper than you can if you're back where you're based. So
yeah.
it's all about mindset.
Yeah, I 100% agree. When we first got to one spot in Thailand, we were there for a month, and this is on that first trip. It was fall of 2018. We, I mean, they were walking us through the Airbnb, and they're like, "And we just got this brand new 50-inch screen TV, and you're the first ones to be here to use it." And we're like, "Oh, cool, okay, no big deal." At the end of that checkout, they said, "Oh, did you like the TV?" And I said, "We never turned it on. And we
Never
didn't turn
turn
it
it
on
on.
one
Yeah.
time in the full month we were there."
Yeah.
And it just really opened our mind. That whole, this whole journey is that we don't want to be disconnected from what's going on in the world. It's, we don't want to be ignorant to it, but it's really given us a chance to pull back and be like, what do we want to flood our mental inbox with? Is it
Yeah.
just the constant churn of news and this and that? So we kind of got a filter on. It's like, we know what's going on in the world, but I'm not going to waste my energy on that. Let's focus on our family. Let's focus on what's most important to give us the best mental health that we can. And so, yeah, we barely watched any TV during that whole year. It was wild. I used to be really into sports, and people were like, "Hey, you can't believe the so and so won the Super Bowl," and I was like, I couldn't tell. I didn't even know who was in the Super Bowl.
Yeah.
It was a wild transformation of what we felt like we wanted to fill our brain with every day. So
Yeah, it's a conscious choice, and I'm trying to do that more. I got into a bad habit of always having like talk radio on in the background, and even though maybe I wasn't consciously listening to it or taking it in or kind of reacting to it, obviously, but subliminal. I can never say that word. You know what I'm trying to say? It's going in there, right? It's going into the
yeah,
brain, and it is affecting the way that you feel or the way that you act or decisions that you make, or maybe decisions that you don't make based on things that you're hearing on the radio or reading in the paper. But Ben, on your social media platform now, which obviously, you've got a big following, and I would urge anyone and everyone who's listening to this, if you're interested or inspired by what Ben's talking about, to go over and check out Ben's socials. They're really interactive. They're really fun. I've seen what you do. But what I want people to realize is, and everybody knows it, right? Everybody's on social media and they're seeing now, people are getting smart and realizing that they might have, by all accounts, a very normal job, right? So, but they're realizing I can monetize this and I can make really good money on the side through just documenting what I'm doing. And for whatever
hmm
reason, people like to watch it and consume it and engage with it. As an example, you might have someone who's a lorry driver, right? 5 years ago, 10 years ago, they were just a lorry driver. Now they've
Mhm.
got the GoPro camera, right? They've got the dash cam, and they're like, well, hey guys, check out where I sleep. This is how I cook my food. This is
Yeah.
how I go to the bathroom. And some of these guys have got hundreds of thousands, if not millions of followers
Yeah.
and views, and they're making hundreds of thousands of dollars a year in content creation. It's amazing. So people
Yeah.
need to realize that whatever they do, even though they might not obviously see value in it or think that they can inspire or monetize it, you really can, right? You've just got to learn how to do it like you've done.
Yeah, yeah, and some of those stories are amazing. Seeing these people that are, have what I would consider like a very, not to, no offense, but like a relatively
Yeah.
mundane job.
Yeah.
It's somewhat similar for my wife. She does, accounting and finance, and she's like, should I start a TikTok account where I show Excel tips but make it funny? And I'm like, yes,
And it
you
would blow
should.
up. Yeah.
Yeah.
It would
So
absolutely.
yeah.
With our mentees that we work with, we have this back and forth all the time because I'm always like pushing them into, to grow their brand and get busy on socials and document everything. And they're like, Alex, I'm not doing anything. I don't have any case studies. I haven't done any deals. I've got no content to put out. And I'm like, what did you do today? Well, I was like kind of scrolling through the portals, the right moves, the Zooplas, your Trulia's, I think it is, over in the US, looking at property deals, and then I made some lunch, had a couple of calls with the agent. I'm like, there you go. If you recorded all that, right, chopped it up and put that out as a few reels, upload it, some written posts about how you're finding it, how you're feeling, being honest, being authentic, being vulnerable
Hmm.
about your wins and your failures, right? That
Yeah.
is what people are resonating with now. And that is all content. Everything you do every single day, however mundane it is, however boring you think it is, there's other people that will watch that and be inspired by it.
Yeah. That's really well said.
Yeah. And you're proof of that. So as we start getting close to the golden hour here, Ben, like I said, there's so much here to talk about. Tell us about is there like an end game here? Have you sat down with your wife recently and your kids and gone, guys, how's this looking for the next period of time?
Yeah, we have. It's a constant discussion. Ever since we made that first decision to do the gap year, it seems like every third conversation between me and my wife is where are we going next? What are we doing? Pros, cons, is it good for us? Is it good for the kids? Can we make it work with our time zone? But we are heavily in that right now. We're wrapping up, I guess, what is equivalent of my daughter's first grade year here in Greece. And the question is, do we go back to the States? Do we continue with this company, Boundless Life, where we can continue down, to new locations around the world and continue the education and experiences we've had there? Or do we find a spot that we've really loved, go there, settle in, and get into a proper international school? Spain is very high on our list. I know you have a place in Mallorca, and we've just recently been there
Mm.
ourselves. And we also love southern Spain, Costa del Sol. So that's a really high on our list. So we're really going through that right now. I actually just started working for this company, Boundless Life, as a family representative. I've been to all the
Wow.
locations, and like, what more of a perfect fit is it for me to help other families on this journey? So now I'm kind of leaning more to, well, maybe we go to Montenegro in the fall and Spain in the winter, and that'll give us a chance to see if we really want to be in Spain. We spend a few months there. So we're not sure, but it's a constant dialogue. And the one thing that we always do now, especially as our daughter is getting older, is include her and our son in these decisions. And obviously, 7 and 4, they're not, making the most. They're basically, our 4-year-old saying, well, wherever has a toy store that sells Paw Patrol,
Yeah.
that's where I want to. That's where I'm
Right.
like, well, okay. But our daughter, she's going to be 8 in the fall. So we're like, what do you like about this lifestyle? What do you like about traveling and moving around and seeing some new friends, but also potentially having other families that we've traveled with show up again and you see them again? Or what did you like about the old lifestyle? Did you like having one teacher for the whole year? Did you like being able to go skiing in the winter? Where right now we missed this winter skiing. So we ask them all of these questions to make sure that we're, like I said earlier, not just dragging them along for some goal of ours. It really is
Mm.
about our family and what is the best for all of us. And if we get a full resonation from them that they're just like, yep, we resonate, we want to go back, we want to go to the US, then me and my wife have to go, all right, let's talk about it. But for now, I think we're probably gonna continue on abroad, and yeah, maybe we'll see you in Majorca.
Yeah, well, we were there right at the same time recently, so we definitely need to catch up for a cold Canya next time
Yeah.
that happens. But mate, I honestly, I really do genuinely, I'm sure you get it all the time on the socials, but I think it's amazing what you guys are doing. I think your kids are extremely fortunate, and I'm really curious, and interested and intrigued to see how your kids are going to grow up and where they go, and because it's such an open door, right? There's so many opportunities. They're going to grow up knowing that the whole world is at their fingertips instead of being pigeonholed. I was having a conversation with a friend of mine's daughter over the weekend, and you know amazing parents, incredible family, very, very tight. But, they're on the typical, they're both parents are very well established, professional roles, very, very close family with, their family and their parents all, grew up where they've gone to school, that kind of thing. Nothing wrong with that. But I was speaking to the daughter and saying, what's your plans? And it was all challenges. It was like, well, I'm trying to get into fashion. It's really difficult here. And I'm trying to, I'm going for multiple interviews, and, it's really difficult to get a foot in the door, and da 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 da. And I've found that, because of the way that I've lived and things I've seen and the places I've been and the people I've met, I find myself now that I'm a bit older, I need to stop myself because I start preaching. I'm like, there is another way. You could go. So I'm like, you could, because beautiful girl. I'm like, you could go off and work on super yachts, right? And you're going to be mixing with billionaires, and you could be on the boat with the owner of Vogue, and you're going to be mixing in circles where all of a sudden it becomes about who right?
Hmm.
And the opportunities that come along through that, rather than, well, here's my piece of paper, and
Yeah.
you know, sorry, we got 300 other people to see. You're probably not going to get the job. It's like there are different ways. Get into super yachts, make incredible money, see the world, have zero outgoings. You could be retired by the time you're 30, literally. When you
Yeah.
know what I know now, but it's like it's trying to like ram that in. So it's really, really interesting how the world's changing. But your kids are going to have the same mindset.
Yeah, yeah. I hope they see the world as a big, beautiful, welcoming place, and not have, potential fears that, so like some of these comments that come across to us are like, oh, don't go there, it's not safe. And I'm like, I mean, have you been there? No. Okay, so I'll let you know how it is.
Yeah.
So a lot of it just comes from fear of the unknown, and I hope that our kids will be a little bit more global citizen minded, and able to kind of meander through whatever careers and stuff that they have later in life. So
Yeah, absolutely amazing. And I really, I've tried at least to do my best to through this interview to, hopefully open the eyes or the minds of other people who feel like they're having to make sacrifice because of their children. And hopefully, through listening to Ben's story, you might start to see some other opportunities and realize that, maybe not always, but maybe there's a really good chance that you could take, the career that you're in and find a way, or start, even if you're not in an obvious role that can be made into some kind of nomadic life. If you know that you want to go down that road, now start to learn, study, build something on the side, which could potentially, right, take over,
yeah,
create more income than what that typical role is making, and allow you to also make it nomadic. I mean, you can monetize pretty much any knowledge these days with the courses and the trainings, that you
yeah,
can build online, and you've got a worldwide audience, a worldwide shop window. You just got to learn it, and you got to say, I can do this, and believe,
yeah,
and it can happen. So Ben, as we start to wrap up here, just got one final question to ask that I like to ask all our guests. It's kind of around mental health, very, very important topic, something that, I've had my interactions with and continue to do so, and need to make sure I'm always exercising and keeping busy and riding my bike in order to, be my best self. So really, it's a very simple question. I think I know the answer to it because of the way that you live. But are you happy in yourself today? Are you mentally and physically where you want to be? Are you waking up in a good spot? Because it's easy for people at home to look at the people that I interview and think that you've got it all sewn up. But yeah. So how are you doing upstairs these days?
Yeah, no, it's a great question. And thank you for, asking that because it's something that does often get overlooked, especially with like a social media personality. It's like the whole
Mm.
Instagram versus reality, like what's real. Um, and I would say 100% I should speak for my wife, but I'm got pretty in tune to how she's feeling as well. We're super happy. Like our mental health, in this lifestyle has allowed us, you know, I should say the lifestyle has allowed our mental health to improve in ways that we never thought possible. Sure, we have, we're a family. We've got young kids. There are temper tantrums. They happen whether you're traveling or whether you're not. You have the mundane, got to make some dinner tonight. Like it happens everywhere. So all of that still happens. But the fact that we as a family are closer knit, we're not going to regret not missing out on our kids when they're young. And we're able to see the world at the same time. I mean, I don't know how much better it could be from a happiness and mental health standpoint. Um, yeah, it's really important. And then we kind of, like I said, we hit pause back in the day when we thought this is not going the way that we would like it to. And I'm so glad that we did that because we never would have guessed that we'd be still doing it 6 years later. And the possibilities, I feel invigorated by it. For me, it's not the same for everybody, but for me, um, routine and the mundane and the repetitive are like killers of joy for me. Like I'm more invigorated, I'm more alive, I'm more happy when I have to be quick on my feet and things are changing. Oh, we got to change that, or we're going to go here. Like that works best for me. And so we strike a balance with that because not everybody, even in our family, is the same way, right? I might be a little bit more energetic to keep things moving quick, but yeah, I think having this lifestyle has been fantastic, and we're pretty strong in the mental health game at this point. So
Yeah, 100%. Keeping busy, like I said, keeping on your feet, keeping stimulated, that's massive. The Groundhog Day thing, the
hmm
sludge, it's that can really grind you down.
yeah,
The one very, very last thing, Ben, that I should have asked before that last final question is what would you say to anyone who's sitting at home, feeling bored, feeling stuck, feeling unfulfilled, that's listening, going, shit, this guy, I'm so inspired, but I've got the job, I've got the mortgage, I've got the newborn or whatever. What would you say to try and help them get out of their own way and realize, cliche, but life can be over
yeah.
tomorrow, so don't delay.
I would say take it in small chunks and identify the roadblocks. Like, what do you think? What does that person think are the barriers to changing your life? Whether is it the job, or is it the fact that you've got a young one? What are those roadblocks? And if you really don't just brush it off, say, "Well, I've got seniority here. I can't leave that because I'll lose out on." But like flip it around and just say like, well, what happens if you did? Like, what would really happen if you did make that change with your life? And a lot of people, I think, just default to, well, I can't because, instead of saying, well, let me actually pause and think about this. So I'd first identify the roadblocks that you feel are the biggest challenges to changing your lifestyle, and then take one at a time and say, well, how could I work around this? Like, what could I do with this roadblock to clear it and to move on to the next roadblock, and then basically make the plan. And it doesn't have to happen overnight. Ours took. We were well traveled, and we loved traveling, and we still took 7 months to plan our exit from our traditional lifestyle. So planning and taking it baby steps. If you just look at the entire picture, like just listen to this podcast, you go, that sounds great, but wow, how can I do that? It doesn't happen overnight. So it's planning and making sure that you just take it slow and take it one at a time. And I think that's probably the biggest thing. But once you make that decision, like, okay, we're going to do it now. How do we do it? That biggest first decision is the hardest. And so I've always said, when you make that decision, everything that's really important to make that future possible will fall into place. And everything, all the noise will just fall away because you've now made the decision you're going to do it. The rest just forget about that. It's not going to matter. And then you just focus on what you really need to focus on to make it happen. And it can take, baby steps. It can take a while.
Mm. Someone said to me, this is a little bit morbid, but I think it might shock some people to consider, is imagine that you're there in some form at your own funeral and you're listening to the eulogies that are being given about your life and the way that you lived. How would you want that to sound? What would you want them people to be saying? And I think that's a really good thing to kind of close up with and just leave that kind of in people's minds, because personally, I want people to say, man, Alex lived his life, he wasn't tied down, he did exactly what he wanted to do. He had fun. He was always in these great places. He worked hard as well, but
He
he
lived a
wanted,
happy life,
lived a happy life, didn't conform,
Yeah.
just to follow the rules. So Ben, it's been amazing. So inspired. We're going to put all of Ben's social links in the studio notes. Go over and check out Ben's socials. Is that the best place to contact you for like questions, tips, advice, just on your Instagram, or what's the best way?
Yeah. On our Instagram, the Fun Employed Family. And I also do some travel coaching, kind of destination planning, that sort of stuff on the Wander Coach. But Fun Employed Family is the best. It's all linked there. And that's the one I'm most active on. And I'm happy to answer questions and DMs and all that stuff.
Amazing. Mate, thanks so much for making this happen. I know you're busy out there, and really appreciate your time. And thanks for everybody for listening and watching at home. And we'll see you all next week on another episode of the Airbnb Nomads podcast. Until then, take care, and we'll see you next time.